All right. So this is a conversation with Enrique and Michael of the editor group about context menus relating to the context editor. So the thing that sparked this whole thing up was this first issue here around like technical analysis of the context menu. Um, and it pertains to a whole bunch of stuff. So maybe Enrique, if you want to verbalize your answer here.
Sure. So I created a technical discovery issue uh, with the purpose of understanding how we can implement context menus in the content editor. What drove this requirement is that on this milestone we are implementing images, support for inserting images, and for rendering tables. Both of those actions, along with links, require special actions to modify those type of content. For example, we want to add rows on a table or remove columns, or in the case of the images, we want to change the alternative text or the source URL. Um, so based on that, we noticed that we probably need a generic component, a generic context menu component that we can customize for each of those type of content. And that's the purpose of this issue. It's like coming up with a common pattern that we can share across all of the content types in the editor.
Mm-hmm. Cool. And just to clarify for the, communication terminology wise, when we're talking about context menu or like the block editor menu, Enrique kind of highlighted this out pretty well. When we talk about the block editor menu, we're kind of thinking of what you might see when you press the backslash in issues right now, and you have like quick actions, or in Notion, where if you click on the plus sign, you get this like giant list. And then the context menu are like the menus that pop up rather to take some specific action on the text or the link. So this could be like inserting the links, or this kind of idea here where you have like pasting the URL, and then you can customize it to have, text up here or like anything else we want to do. But what we're kind of talking about today is kind of like setting the foundations, or the generic kind of, like, for example, for this would be like the pop-up, and then depending on the different content type, we can fill in the context menu with whatever things in there. um, so yeah um, so I think that covers this block here. So I think I agree with you with the context menu and the block menu, and that makes sense to me. Yeah. The next question I had was like, what do you need to help with your technical analysis? And you said just general design product expectations of how the menu should look and behave. Yeah. In the spirit of iteration, we can always change this in the future, but kind of setting that foundation. Um, and then you linked off to this issue, which is creating links. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
the purpose of me linking to that issue is that, well, is to make the case that every content type has different requirements for their context menus. So I think that
Mm.
our design discussion, our design conversation will continue as we work on specific context menus for those type of content. For example, um, we need to understand how we want to what we want to do when we want to insert a new link. Like in this case, I shared two screenshots of two very different approaches to inserting links, one in Notion and one in Google
Mm.
Docs. So I think that at some point we will have that conversation as well, like how we want to what let's say like features or we want to provide in the context menu for links.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So what I said to that was today I was taking a look at this issue here, the snippet in the content editor, and okay, I'm just going to share it on my screen because I can't zoom in any further than that. So yeah, our block editor could look as crazy as this, even more. I was just like taking what we have right now and just adding to that. So this is like the wiki page, which is the home of the content editor right now. It looks like that we aligned on the backslash for quick actions. We'll like cross that bridge once we clash with existing quick actions. But right now in the wiki, I think we're safe to just live on our own. Um, I try to use things that exist in the GitLab UI kit here, where we have the pop-up and some kind of search. I think this search could either be at the bottom or at the top, depending on like where the screen real estate is and all that stuff. But I think at the bottom is a good start. And this is where, so if I clicked on snippet, it would open up this screen. Um, and I think this is kind of like me thinking a little bit about the foundation of how these blocks get added, that there'll be like some kind of gray bit where it's like a placeholder for that spot, and then you do some action here. This is like an example where you could search at the list of public names, kind of like your your example with the Google Docs inserting a link to something, or if you had the specific URL to the snippet, you could add it in here. If you clicked away, this is where this thing comes in handy. If you clicked away from it, if you clicked on this, it would open back up the pop-up. I've seen some applications execute this pop-up in different ways. This is one where it's kind of like contextual to the content block itself, but I've seen other ones where they kind of treat it like a modal. I think this is like one of those interactions that we'll figure out from what's easy to implement and like what's possible. So this is probably like a collaboration. I know in the static site editor, we went with modals for everything to keep life simple, but I think now, yeah,
So
we
we
can
have
try to push
now
it a little bit
a
harder.
bit, yeah, we have a bit more of control now over
Mm,
the selected selected content. In
mm,
general, we also have like some tools from GitLab to display
mm,
UI elements based on the selection context. So I think that we can
mm,
give it a try immediately to something more contextual. That's my preference, but I don't know
mm.
if that's even the right thing to do.
I think being more contextual is the right way forward. That's the whole spirit of this. Um, where we one day that this thing will be like psh, gone, right? And then, like like that's whether we go that far. Like I'm not 100% sure yet, but like it could go like, and that's why we're operating like this, and we have these things close so that you don't need to jump up to the top. Once the snippet's added, it's added, and this is where life gets kind of interesting. um, we could do something with tooltips, or we could just leverage the triple dots to like show like deletion or changing. um, as a first iteration, always just happy to say like if you click on this and press like delete or backspace, it deletes the whole thing. That's also pretty common behavior. So having like an explicit delete button is not really necessary day one. I think having like the kind of area to like hold it just while you're while you're in draft mode makes sense because it gives you kind of a sense of where the thing will happen. um yeah, this is like one execution that I was playing around with, and then the other thing that I was playing around with is this kind of contextual menu where if you add a link to the page, then for example, if it's an image or something like that, perhaps you can convert that into like a image block or a snippet block or that kind of idea. So this is another kind of contextual. This would be a context menu, right? Uh, Specific to text. Um, but yeah.
So I noticed that we had a visual style that resembles tooltips in one example, and this one is more similar to drop downs. So
And this
do
one
you
here, this
envision?
one is drop downs. Yeah.
Yeah. So do you envision like having those type of you know, different styles of I don't know, different styling for context menus, like depending on the type of action
Hmm.
or the type
Good
of
question.
content?
So for example, the question is like, should the pop-up, should the context menu have these icon things in there as well?
No.
From a learnability,
Oh, that was not my question. It's more like when you were showing the example that allows to edit an image. I think that it was
oh,
like
an image. This one?
no, it was like
Was
it had like a tooltip. It
oh
has a
oh yeah
black
yeah
color.
yeah yeah. This guy.
Yes. So this one
Yeah.
looks very different from the other menus. Do you
Mm-hmm.
envision like
Mm-hmm.
having these different types based on the I don't know, maybe on the content type or any other criteria?
Short answer is I did this to kind of spark conversation. Like I could see this as also like change, remove. Um, right now in our current state, I would probably say try to keep things as consistent as possible. Because if we do have where this came from is like, in the handbook when you select over text, I was like playing around with that idea. Um, it doesn't need to happen like that. The reason that I did try with the tooltip here is in the context of like what would trigger this menu here, right? So I was trying to figure out if like this thing should like exist on the side or like in it or somewhere. um so I think this stuff we can figure out the finer details later, but yeah, I was just trying to figure out what would trigger this menu, right? Is it clicking on the area itself to trigger it? It might work when the thing's small, but if it's like edge to edge, like is there enough hit area? Is this thing really like an interactable snippet in this state, or is it only interactable once we click save? Because we're currently in edit mode. So yeah, this is why I think this is really good to have this type of conversation, because yeah, it's really hard to suss this one out from just looking at the pictures. So yeah, I would defer to your like both executions probably to me makes sense. I feel this is introducing another pattern that may not scale, because if there's more actions or stuff like that, it may not hold up. Having something like this is very similar to like how Notion handles their like lists of actions. It's very long, their actions. Um, but I think there's a benefit with going with this kind of menu because it's one less thing, the one less pattern to learn, right? Like otherwise we have like a menu, a block menu, a context menu, and a tooltip menu. It's like so many. So I think to keep things simple and for this conversation, let's just say like we just go with this right now to keep life a little bit consistent, and then we can find optimizations, or like if there's a need to do this type of pattern in the future, then sure, let's revisit that. But to keep things simple, context menu, block menu. Yeah,
Cool. And I think
great
that
question.
then I gonna like add to my list of things that I have to investigate how to include uh, those three dot buttons in complex content types like snippets. Um,
Yeah, I think snippets. I think we can cross that bridge near in the future, because snippets have a different problem as well. That they're actually a script in an iframe, and our editor parses that out anyway. So it shows like nothing to preview here, in those scenarios. So we need to cross that bridge. What might be more interesting or like equally relevant is like how would you do this for an image that's like edge to edge, where like would you click on like maybe that's like because at the same time it should be foundational, right? Like it should be consistent across object types. So like the button to edit it shouldn't change depending on the content type, because it's a block. It's almost like these are actions you can do to this magical block. You can change the content of it, or you can remove it, or and even like a first iteration is just to remove it, like, and then re-add it. That's like the boring solution, right? That's
yeah, I can imagine like I see images as a simpler scenario because in the case like we can follow the pattern of just selecting the image. When you are in a text editor, you can select anything. Like the concept of selection applies to any type of content. And at the moment that you like select an image and you are not selecting any other content, like you are not selecting text and image at the same time or link an
mm,
image, then you can just like
mm,
say, oh, I detected an image in this selection, and then I can immediately display the context menu.
mm, yeah. um a pattern that I've seen before is like hovering on the area then surfaces this like other menu, only on hover, um, and then clicking on that then removes it. Or you can even have this always persistent, and then it's just like it's like a layer on top of your content. And the question, it could also be like something at the bottom here, like a little tab or some kind of thing while you're in edit mode that you can hit to say change it. Um, yeah, I think there's many different patterns that we could do here, and that's something that I can spend some time to just like investigate, because it feels like we're creating like these nice little containers, and if we just solve it once, and we kind of have one pattern, you can stick whatever you want in there, and then
Something
cool.
that is probably
This
worth like investigating as well is how we can make this keyboard friendly. I think that's one of the points that you made in the document.
yes, yeah. So let me jump back into this. Limitations, no limits. I like it. Okay, so So if we go block editor, how can we make it keyboard accessible? Ideas. This is a interesting question in general. Like, I thought these elements in Google Docs was keyboard accessible, but they're not. So you can't really tab across. So if I tab, I get here, but then I can't go through the toolbar, right? And like the accessibility pattern for keyboard is like shortcuts, right? Like Command
Exactly. Yeah.
K and stuff like that. Yeah. So, so I think that will make editing. So I think using this like quick actions is one good way. Um, then yeah, the Command K is a good one. We can also display context menu with shift arrow keys. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was talking about with images. Like, you can press shift and then move the arrow keys to select something in the editor. Can be text, it can be anything.
Mm,
So
mm,
when based on the selected content, you can display,
mm,
a context menu that is only relevant to that selected content.
mm,
The only problem that I noticed with that in existing editors is that that context menu on itself is not accessible
mm,
via keyboard, keyboard navigation.
mm, mm-hmm. Yep. It is not. Yeah. How do you select an image? Oh, yeah. So for example, right now I have the context menu here. I selected that by shift arrowing onto the image, but then yeah, good luck getting to the because tab just moves it. Fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You gotta just like go through the actions using the keyboard.
I think we do have to introduce more keyboard shortcuts. So it's but then we have a lot of keyboard shortcuts within GitLab. So it's probably we should have a map so that we don't conflict, and we probably should just use what people are used to, like command like Control B or Command B to bold text, things like that could help. I think our heading with Markdown is pretty good because we support that. So if you use double hashes, you get a heading too. So that's already implemented. I think it's more education around that. So I think that's how we will tackle some accessibility stuff. Yes, I think that's worth investigating further. I don't think it's a solved problem in general with everything here, but it feels like it's an opportunity that we can explore deeper. What do you think about that?
Um, yeah, that's something that we should be careful about is I think that you even said that is the conflicting keyword shortcuts. That's something that we are dealing with now with the shortcut of pressing command plus return, because that's the keyword shortcut um, used for saving content in the wiki. But at the same time, in the content editor is a keyword for inserting a heartbreak. um,
Can will is conflicting with the existing shortcuts. that's so maybe like an action item here would be like just to map out all the keyboard shortcuts that we have now, and then it's like cool content editor ones. So it's just like a Google sheet, and just like cool, um, conflict, no conflict, and then have like Google Docs or like Word ones, like common commands for them, and see where they conflict and where they don't, and make a decision from there.
By the way, how do we? I've been thinking this week also that we don't have a central documentation for the content editor where we document those keyword shortcuts. Um, we created a documentation for the development guidelines, how you can insert, how you can use a content editor in other features. And we also have like some wiki specific documentation about the content editor, but we don't have a place
Mhm.
where we can say, let's document all of the keyword shortcuts for that component. And perhaps something that we should do, and something that I noticed in the feedback issue, is that
Mm.
some users recommended displaying the keyboard shortcut in the tooltip for the toolbar buttons.
Mm.
But even like, having a general pop-up that users can, well, like that accessibility menu in Google Docs, like a place I can go
Mhm.
to learn the keyword shortcut is, something that could be useful.
Mm. Uh, yeah, I have an issue for that. I'll follow up later with it. Because that's something I wanted to introduce in our sidebars menu, because we already have keyboard shortcuts to jump to like issues and stuff like that. Um, and it's just surfacing them throughout the whole application. Very similar to like how Slack does it, where if you hover over it and you can see like there's 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 like keyboard commands everywhere. Like you go not there, here, back in history and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's a really good idea. Yeah, I'll link to the issue for there. Um, Kind of similarly, it's like onboarding users to the content editor is something that we spoke about very briefly, like in the product and design chat so far. We haven't talked about it much in depth, but the idea is like there's a lot of features that we're gonna have in there, a lot of block editing. So the way that we could um, think about if the things that we're building are useful to people is not only looking at how many commits that they're making with it, is like how many of the formatting tools that they're using, how many different elements that they're using to express their thoughts. So it's taking that idea that everyone can contribute, but like elevating it to like richer content. That's why we're doing this, so that you can express different things. um, so that will help fuel future work. If we want to support more types and content, there's a rationale for it, and we can track it as well. So yeah, roughly I think we're pretty much on the same page on context menu and block editors in my view, because I feel like we're trying to just follow industry norms at the moment, and stick from there, and where we need to deviate we'll cross that bridge when we need to, but we should do something that's familiar to users and not rock the boat too much on content editing. And the examples you shared of using Notion, Medium, and stuff like that is very similar to some of the things that inspired my thinking. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page right now. Um, is there anything that we didn't cover that would help you, or Is there something that you need next week ASAP to help move along your technical discovery?
No, I just going to stay in touch with you and try to to request your feedback as soon as I have
Mhm.
something that is testable.
Yeah, awesome. All right. I'm just gonna stop the share, stop the recording.